Hi, everyone.
Greetings. We are on page 116 and 117 of the Finished Mystery. We've already spent 2 pages talking about verse 8. And in verse 8, well, I'll read it first and then we'll see what they've got reserved for this discussion, the 3rd page on this verse. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. That was the subject of the last 2 pages. Mm-hmm. And they were given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth. So far we've seen that all the horses and their riders are all about the papacy, which goes with the theme of the chapter, which is 6 seals in the papacy. Mm-hmm. And we've made the point that all this is now dropped. It's all now about things that have happened on the earth since 1914. Here it was about primarily the Middle Ages. Mm-hmm. But they're in a hurry to get from early Middle Ages, when the creeds started to be set up, to the Reformation, because by the time you get to verse 9, when they open the 5th seal, they want to apply all this to Reformation. So now this seal has to cover the entire span from Constantine onwards to the Reformation, which is 1100 years plus. Mm-hmm. So what do they think, what are they going to tell us is the character of this period? So what do they say, first of all, at the top about authority given to them, or power, and the 4th part of the earth?
They say, to His Holiness, the Pope, and all the cardinals, bishops, archbishops, priests, inquisitors, kings, and rulers over Europe, but not over Asia, Africa, and America. So this power is given.
So they give you the real titles, including a capital H, Holiness, His Holiness the Pope. They want to sarcastically make the point that, well, power, you see, these names, we don't have names like this for our leaders, but they do. But the point is that although titles are always there in any human governance or system of governance, the point is that the real authority to do the things you want to talk about was not given them. That is, the power to persecute people, the power to commit atrocities over and over again, maybe for a generation or 2. That's the next subject, isn't it? And it's all about, as you just said, you say 1/4 of the earth, a 4th part of the earth is being covered by this, and you apply that to Europe. But of course, Europe isn't 1/4 of the earth. It's nowhere near 1/4 of the earth.
Yeah, so they do history, I would say, much like they do Bible study. They pick and choose. And I think last time we talked about, they look for things that are horrible so that they can focus on that and give you the idea that this is true of a whole period of time.
Yeah.
So they do that with this, and they only quote themselves. They quote Russell in Time Is at Hand, giving you a description of horrors that did happen, but not for 1100 years.
So it's bad history. We're going to get to that in more detail in a minute. But it's also bad geography. Like, it's very arbitrary that you should say 1/4 of the earth. Even today, the Roman Catholic Church doesn't have power over 1/4 of the earth. In those days, in the medieval period, we hadn't even discovered, 3 or 4 of the continents yet. So it's arbitrary, and therefore it is distorted. It is a lie. With a part truth built in, namely that the Pope did have a lot of power, but he only had it in the way you want to see it, that authority to persecute. He only had that power for a portion of the Middle Ages, so it's not the character of the whole Middle Ages. And he doesn't even get that power until the Eastern Church breaks away in the year 1054.
But that wouldn't fit your narrative.
It wouldn't. So now we don't want to go through most of page 117 because it's a very gross description of the Inquisition period, the atrocities perpetrated. And it's true that these atrocities were perpetrated, and it's true that, the atrocities are so gross that I guess the right word would be, it's unspeakable. But that doesn't stop Russell from speaking about it. He wants to rub it in that this is what Christendom, more particularly Catholicism or the papacy, was guilty of. So it's a part truth that makes a whole lie, namely
Yeah.
that this is the character of the whole period.
So you sometimes talk about if you're looking at history, you can either zoom in or zoom out. You can look at it as if you're looking in a microscope and just focus in on one specific time or place or detail. But if you make that the whole, you're misrepresenting the truth.
Yeah.
So you're better off looking at it from a distance and seeing the whole thing than just pinpointing one time.
So what is the telescopic view of the Middle Ages? Because the part that we used to call the Dark Ages, although I must admit when I was a kid, when I heard Dark Ages, I thought it was the whole Middle Ages.
Yeah.
But that's a period of 1100 years.
And I think a lot of people today still think of it that way. So it's not just the Watchtower that does this.
No.
Lots of people
not at
do
all.
it.
But it's a very worldly way to look at history, namely that
Or naive.
it's a black and white way of looking at history,
Yeah.
and they're very good at this as a cult. Well, you'd expect it of a cult, but you don't expect it of the world. Well, the world is ignorant too.
Yeah, so if you're only looking for negatives, you have to zoom in. But if you're looking across, you're going to see negatives and positives.
Yeah.
So during this period, there were positives too.
So the martyrs you're concerned with here are the martyrs of the Inquisition. Now, how many generations is that? It's a period of a couple of centuries when it's at its most intense, what you're describing here. Yes, there was persecution and loss of life, martyrs made throughout all of that period. But a lot of the martyrs were what you would call Roman Catholics and other medieval Christians going out where the need was great, taking risks, and many of them losing their lives, certainly losing their livelihoods and their properties, leaving them behind.
Yeah.
And the papacy was not in full control of all of this. They didn't get that kind of power, which you imagine they had, until, like I said, after the break with the Eastern Church, 1054. But there were persecutions before that, and it was Christian upon Christian. That's the part that's missing here. This is Christian upon Christian violence, just as violence in most of the Old Testament is Israelite upon Israelite. The persecutions, anyway, not wars. Although it is sometimes wars too. So bloodshed, whether it be persecution or warfare, Jew upon Jew, before that Israelite upon Israelite. Well, in history it's been Christian upon Christian here. And the part missing is that some of these people, who even the persecutors, did it in all sincerity. There's a strange doublethink going on, though, even in Russell's quote, which is more than half of the page from the time is at hand. Russell is quoting during this section of the book. I'm just saying the light is really bad in here.
It's kind of stormy outside.
The first sentence says, "The destruction of new creatures by wresting of the scriptures and their spiritual starvation are here in evidence, but there's also a literal fulfillment." And then it quotes from Russell. So, again, an arbitrariness about, well, it is literal in that people were starving during the Middle Ages, literally. But what we've had so far has been mostly spiritual starvation. Again, the fault of the Pope. He had no such power, by the way, until deep into the Middle Ages to take the scriptures away from you, which were, for most of Christendom, for a large part of that time, in Greek, not in Latin. So he couldn't take the word away from you yet.
You didn't have it yet.
Yeah, Jerome hadn't even translated it in the early years, and it hadn't spread around. So, no, you couldn't take the word away. So the narrative is faulty, bad history in so many ways. I think we need to emphasize, though, that most of the martyrs during these 1100 years were Christians, and they weren't being persecuted by the papacy. They were dying because they were taking the word of God to people who needed the word of God, and they were dying at the hands of those people who needed the word of God more often than not.
Yeah.
Not that there weren't millions of people killed by people claiming to be Christians. That's true. That's the true part of this. But that's not the dominant character of the whole 1100 years until the Reformation.
So the next period, they're going to say the fifth seal is about the Reformation, right?
Yeah. Now, what's our link?
To this one, we're going to link one of your ladderettes on the Dark Ages and the playlist to ladderette.
I think we need to say and emphasize that it's in the best interest of the Watchtower narrative to keep the Dark Ages dark.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of information about the Dark Ages out here, but you'd never know that here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
See you soon.